Hello, everyone. So it is day 3 of Just Lead, and it has been an awesome week, and I hope that you feel the same way. We are just super excited that all of you guys are back and that we're all together and that we're enjoying spending time together. And it is snack time right now, so it's time for us to open up the Bible and learn what God has to say to us today. We're going to kind of pick up where we left off yesterday. But first, before we continue in our story about Queen Esther and how she's going to speak out for justice, let's give you a minute to talk about a time that maybe you've already done it, or we're going to talk about what might happen if you ever have to do it. So first, I want you to stop the video and I want you to talk with each other. So teachers, I need you to stop the video for a few minutes and give the kids a minute to say a time where maybe something was happening to a friend at school that wasn't fair. And you decided to speak up for this person to try and make it right, what was going on, what was happening to them. And then maybe you haven't had that happen. Well, can you think of something that might happen like that? And then what would you do about it? So I'm going to give you an example, okay? Let's say that you are on the playground, okay? And let's say that one of your friends is getting picked on. Maybe it's because, I don't know, maybe it's because they've got a piece of clothing on that people think is ugly. And these other people are saying mean things about their clothing. And, well, that's not fair to that person. Maybe that person really likes what they're wearing. Or maybe they didn't even pick it out. Maybe their parents picked it out for them that day. And it's not fair for those other children to make fun of them. So tell me, what would you do about that? But remember, you can stop the video and actually talk about a time that something actually did happen. Or you can think of another example. Just think of some times that might have happened. Okay. What we're going to do, we're going to go ahead after you talk about it. You can play the video again, and we're going to finish, and we're going to read some more of the story of Queen Esther and see what she does to speak out for justice. Now remember, the king that she's married to has just been talked into making a law that says that nobody can bow down or worship anybody else but him. Remember, that mean man Haman talked him into doing it. But Queen Esther has a cousin that's heard about it. And remember, Queen Esther and her cousin, they worship God. And not only do they do it, but lots of people in the city that they live in worship God. So now they're all in danger because if they get caught worshiping God, then they will be killed. And Mordecai goes and tells Esther about it and says, you need to do something about this. So let's see what happens. Esther didn't like to hear that. What can I do? She said to herself. The king sometimes kills those who come before him without being summoned. Finally, Esther sent word to Mordecai. Gather all the Jews in the city, pray, and do not eat for 3 days and nights. Then I will go to the king. After 3 days, Esther put on her royal robes and crown and entered the king's chamber. What do you want, Esther? King Xerxes asked. Esther was frightened, but she stood up and said, I most humbly request the presence of your majesty and your servant Haman at a banquet I've prepared. The king could not refuse such a humble request. So the king and Haman went to the banquet, and they ate and drank and watched the entertainment Esther provided. At the end of this, King Xerxes asked once more, Esther, what is it that you wish? Esther meekly replied, I most humbly request the presence of your majesty and your servant Haman at the banquet that I've prepared for tomorrow. Then I will tell you what I desire. Of course, all this made Haman very proud. He thought he was a very important man indeed. Haman went home and told his wife, I am the only one Queen Esther invited to be with the king, and the king and I return tomorrow for another banquet. If only I didn't have to see that wretched Mordecai every time I enter the king's gate. Haman's wife suggested to him, have a gallows built today. In the morning you can ask the king to hang Mordecai on it. I'm sure the king will do whatever you ask, and then you can go to the banquet a happy man. So Mordecai had the gallows built. That night, the king could not sleep, so he read the history of his reign. He read of Mordecai's exposure of the plot to kill him. In the morning, he asked his attendants, did I honor Mordecai for saving my life? No, my king, came the answer. And just then Haman came to ask the king to hang Mordecai. But before Haman could speak, the king asked, what is a good way to honor a man? Haman thought, he's going to honor me. So he said, place the king's robe on the man's shoulders and his crown upon his head. Place him on the king's horse and have a prince lead him through the streets shouting, this is a man that the king thinks highly of. All right, so we'll stop right there. Now, remember, Esther has asked the king for a banquet, like a dinner. And she's asked to invite Haman. And Haman thinks, ooh, I am important. They asked me to a banquet. Well, then the king starts reading about his history. And Mordecai actually saved his life at one point. Remember, this is Esther's cousin. And so he thinks, I need to know of a way to honor a man. Or remember, Haman's on his way to ask the king to hang Mordecai. But the king says, how do you think if I want to make someone feel important, how should I do that? Well, who does Haman think he's wanting to make feel important? It's him, right? But that's not who he's talking about. So we're going to find out tomorrow what happens when King Xerxes honors Mordecai and this banquet happens. Now, how do you think that Queen Esther was feeling when she went to the king to ask about the banquet? Would you stop the video and talk about that for a minute? How do you think she was feeling? This is where she starts to speak up for justice. And how do you think it made her feel? Maybe you could talk about when you stopped the video just a minute ago, you talked about when someone at school, when you spoke up for them. How did it make you feel to do that? Talk about that for a few minutes. All right, and then when you're done, you'll start the video again, and we're going to do our memory verse. Okay? See that justice is done. Let mercy be your first concern, and humbly obey your God. Micah 6, verse 8. All right, do that with me. See that justice is done. Let mercy be your first concern, and humbly obey your God. Micah 6, verse 8. All right, very good. Now we'll keep practicing that this tomorrow, and that'll be that we'll be done with that memory verse for the week. All right. Now before you go on to your next thing, let's go ahead and do our rules, and then you'll be done. All right, here we go. Now, we've been saying this for 2 days now. So if you're someone that is just now learning the rules, you should be getting ready to start to say them with everybody else. So everybody try your best to say the rules together. Number 1, listen and follow directions the first time. Number 2, raise your hand and don't blurt out. Number 3, Respect others with your words and don't use foul language. Number 4, keep hands and feet to yourself. 5, no cell phones, electronics, or toys in program. Number 6, respect the property. 7, no illegal drugs and no weapons. Number 8, remain seated facing the front and quiet on all buses and vans. Number 9, no kicking balls in the gym unless it's a dodgeball. Number 10, stay out of the ice machine. 11, hang up all backpacks and coats. 12, remain seated while eating snack. 13, delayed obedience is disobedience. And then we added one more. Remember, number 14, keep your shoes on your feet at all times. Good job, everybody. All right. So yesterday, and there was one class that didn't watch the video yesterday, so I'll kind of review what I talked about. But 2 classes watched my video yesterday, and I went over what it meant to listen and follow directions the first time. So if you didn't get to watch the video, or maybe you just weren't listening at the time, it's actually kind of funny because it's what we're talking about in the rule. Remember, it is important for you when a teacher asks you to do something to do it the first time. And remember, we give you rules and instructions because we want to keep you safe and keep you happy. Just remember that. As soon as a teacher tells you to do something, you do it. Okay? Not 2 seconds later, not 5 minutes later, not when you're ready for it, but follow directions the first time. All right, so let's go on to number 2, because we're talking about what these rules mean this week and next week. Ooh, I like this one. Raise your hand and don't blurt out. All right, so this is important. When you want to say something, and because there are times when we get to talk and it's okay for everybody to be talking at the same time. Like maybe when you're working on a project and your teacher's giving you permission to whisper to your neighbor. Well, that's not always the case. And that's probably not always the case for a good reason. It's good for us to just not talk for a little bit and just to think, just to listen. So, when it is not okay for you to talk all at the same time, the rule is to raise your hand and don't blurt out. And it doesn't mean this, like raise your hand and say what you need to say while you're raising your hand. You have to wait to be called on. So let's just pretend like Miss Allie has a question for me and we're in class and I'm the teacher and I'm not giving her permission to talk. She's got to raise her hand and wait till I say, yes, Miss Allie, what would you like to say? And until then, she can't say anything. Now, you ask, why? Why do we have to do that? Well, let's think about this. What if everybody talked at the same time all the time? Would we ever understand each other? Would we ever get anything done? Probably not. So, the best thing for us to do when we've not been given permission to talk at all at the same time is to raise your hand and don't blurt out. Say that with me one more time. Say it with me. Raise your hand and don't blurt out. Okay. I hope you have an awesome day at Just Lead, and I will be seeing you in a little bit. And I hope you have a great day. Love you guys.